I should have my head examined for giving any credence to the notion this show might surprise us and be good. This is every bit as lame, full of sour memberberries, despairingly unoriginal and fan-fiction-like as most other Disney Star Wars gunk. The characters are boring, the script is boring, the stakes are boring, the music is boring, the actors are boring, the momentum, rhythm, tone, camera work, lighting, costumes, and sets are boring. Dialogue, instead of jumping off the page, flies back onto it. One of the most conspicuous things is the bafflingly lackluster look and cinematography for the $22 million price tag per episode, with all the ancillary characters and galaxy denizens looking like ass. Who or what is this thing? It looks like Darth Vader fucked a Jawa, or that he has one of those old-fashioned orange glowing bar heaters for a brain, and why is there what seems like a molten glass bubble for a mouth? But don't forget this guy, with his ZZ top beard and his nose higher than his eyes, which must be revolting when he has a cold, or this guy, who looks like an orc dressed as Peacemaker, or this clanking, ridiculous creation, the Iron Giant crossed with a Down syndrome Cylon from Battlestar Galactica. The show kicks off, and goes straight over the dead ball line, with a bar fight in which Carrie-Anne Moss, aka the Matriarchix, and a mysterious bandit force user go head-to-head in a melee that is intended to impress with its rapid twisting and pivoting, but becomes tedious after a minute because it's over-choreographed, overwrought, and over-stylized for us to get invested in the action, or care much about the combatants, who we don't know, with one being Jedi-ishly stoic and subdued in the boring Jedi way we've all become accustomed to. Then there's a spaceship scene where it turns out the bandit assassin chick is actually a likable female character called Osha. Could this mean they are two different people? Oh my god, we've had our expectations subverted. We know that she's likable because, exactly like with Sabine Wren, she talks wistfully to herself, and then wistfully to her cute merchandising opportunity side character. Then there's generic banter between plucky independent young female character and generic guy. We also get the Neimoidians, only this time in a super on-the-nose, actually hilarious way. Their Japanese accents, which tedious people claimed were racist, have been replaced or thinned out with a kind of generic, vaguely camp tone. Because if there's anything this show is, it's generic and camp. Osha and nondescript guy experience an incident while doing repairs which involves an actual fire in space. The ship is then visited by generic lacking masculinity guy, who many by now will recognize as the poor soul of an actor who not once, but twice referred to Anakin Skywalker blowing up the Death Star.
But if you can't look and see that Anakin blowing up the Death Star possibly killed millions and millions of people.
What is this with everybody? No. What is it? Really?
Only me.
Why? I'm serious.
He is a character who seems singularly designed to be talked over, mocked, belittled, to make dumb, vainglorious decisions lacking in self-awareness. In other words, they cast the perfect actor. He is accompanied by his Padawan, who has a crown of the head like Darth Maul, the blue eyes of Paul Atreides, and the ears of a Ferengi from Star Trek. Once again, we have our expectations subverted because the basic assumption we might have that the actor playing this character of Jord would have a rudimentary ability to act in a way that isn't ridiculous is severely undermined by his exaggerated posture, exaggerated mannerisms, and extremely stilted manner that makes us detest him after scarcely a minute of screen time. It turns out these two were old friends. We know this not from inference or sophisticated dialogue, but from young Osha referring to Dreadlocked Guy as old friend. We know that Osha has a backstory full of pain and suffering and loss, including her entire family. We know this because her backstory is meted out by her old Jedi friend in a systematic and dull way, rivaled only by the multiplicity of backstories piled on top of each other in Rebel Moon. Having said that, even Zack Snyder would be able to make this emerging snooze fest relatively or even barely interesting. After 2 or 3 minutes of static shots and dull dialogue, it almost had me yearning for slow-motion depictions of the harvesting of grain. Our protagonist is interrogated by the Jedi and Padawan, and everything points to her being responsible for the death of the lady from the Matrix, and she is escorted away to a prison ship to meet her fate. We then travel to Coruscant, and a youngling training session where white males have either been excommunicated en masse, or midichlorians have become prejudiced and abandoned all Caucasian hosts. There is then some inane cod wisdom mumbo-jumbo aimed at making the Force seem profound and abstract, with some feeble claptrap about jumping into an ocean and feeling its weight, its stillness, and uncertainty. which is clearly whack and lame because we've been told by Yoda no less to not feel its stillness, but to feel it flow through you. Needless to say, the dialogue strays perilously close to Rings of Power, ship, floats, stone, cannot territory. We then get some green chick with no personality, who might as well be General Syndulla, except without the green appendages and Biggles goggles, and it's time for the younglings to go to lunch. One of the younglings stirs from her mystical reverie so abruptly, it was a bit like me after lapsing into a brief nap during the turgid unfolding scene. Sadly, these two new adult characters are semi-emotional, stoic, and lacking in distinguishable personalities, who both speak like robots. They then discuss a backstory they both are aware of, which is actually contrived and lacking in naturalism. Apparently Osha was saved by Indara, that's the Matrix lady, and by the guy from Squid Game, who was obviously squandered in this role because in Squid Game he was a more dynamic and animated and sympathetic everyman, whereas this role, with this dialogue, makes him boring and flat and insipid. After dispensing some faux sophisticated, imbecilic-sounding, classy, formal sentence constructions, our green bald lady leaves our Jedi Master to peer into a conjectural middle distance for what seems like an eternity. Back on the criminal transport, where plucky protagonist is behaving in the exact, tentative, but fatalistic, but aware way of Sabine Wren, like literally 99% exactly the same personality, we are actually introduced to a white male. This is about 20 minutes in, though he is gross, conniving, low IQ, criminal white guy, but at this point, don't look a gift Caucasian in the mouth. And we get a visual of this guy, who looks like that actor from The Princess Bride, if you shaved his head, lobotomized him, and put him in a discount Halloween Darth Vader suit. There is a prison break, with Osha left behind, and the ship being battered by asteroids. And there's a hilarious tonal and acting whiplash as our protagonist scowls, breathes intently, scrabbles with her play pocket toy, screeches jubilantly for half a second, frees a wastrel white dude from a flubber xenomorph, then the abruptly revived dude, who can scarcely know where he is or what's going on, screams and scampers straight to a remaining escape pod and launches off to God knows where, all in the space of 20 seconds. It's actually hilarious. And stupid, and retarded. Osha crash lands on an icy planet, and we whiplash again to Coruscant, where the spiky-scalped chick asks the Jedi guy why he still pores over old images of his past Padawan, and he muses,
"If you don't meditate on the past."
And he is interrupted by the young chick, who completes the phrase.
We're doomed to repeat it.
Oh, brilliant, Leslie Headland. You must have pored over that one for weeks. Take away one syllable and the whole delicate epigram collapses. So now, Jedis must divest themselves of old sentimentality and past ties, but also be mindful of the importance of the past. But they should also be aware that many of the things we cling to can only be understood from a certain point of view, and also that you shouldn't look away to the future, to the horizon, but also that you should be mindful of the future, but not at the expense of the moment. Fuck, honestly, who cares anymore? Anywho, Osha has a vision of her evil twin sister, May, and two poorly acting young girls pretend to be macabre. Osha, meanwhile, is tottering and shuffling around the snow planet in modest clothing, without seeming to be succumbing to hypothermia, or even a slight shiver. Osha is tracked down by Sol, and then, to round off the episode, we get an equally abrupt scene encompassing the tired old trope of a baddie underling approaching their evil master, and the evil guy ignites a lightsaber, in a stylish but redundant way, like Darth Maul igniting his lightsaber during his intergalactic phone call in Solo: A Star Wars Story. And the baddie talks about Jedis and dreams and killing dreams, and other cod nonsense in a perfect monotone. And just when we had begun to tune into this scene, there is a comically quick end and blunt cut to the closing credits. Episode 2 begins with Memberberry's door pole robot, then another kid who can't act, and there's a strange thing with this show. Extras, in particular children, all seem to have accents like they're from some working-class neighborhood in London. It is also revealed to the characters that Osha's evil twin sister is alive, deflating a lot of the suspense or momentum on the mystery front. And we are introduced to another weak male character with scarcely any masculinity, who talks in a kind of Brooklyn Italian gangster accent. Then we cut back to Osha and Sol, who maunder through some exposition about the past for an eternity, with it becoming apparent that Sol is just not a compelling or even convincing character, with no gravitas, or presence, or feeling that we could become invested in him. It pains me to have to relate this, but Osha's evil twin is trying to kill a Jedi in a local temple, and the Jedi is just levitating, floating in a trance, which, we gather, he has been doing for an incredibly long duration, with him not having spoken to anyone in 10 years, and he looks like the synthesizer player in a 70s prog rock band. The whole setup is so laugh-out-loud ridiculous that it's hard to imagine the actor not chortling and smirking through his role while this absolutely brain-dead scenario was playing out. Anyway, he dies by drinking a fluorescent green goo that the evil twin has prepared for him. Finally, there is a prolonged fight between Sol and May, which is boring as shit and concludes with May escaping through the painfully contrived strategy of kicking up a huge swirl of dirt. What a brilliant twist. Sol, with all his mystical power, can't prevent May escaping in a speeder that just happened to be there. The episode concludes with a Wookiee who uses the Force to disarm some scavengers, something that looks patently ridiculous, made yet more egregious by the fact the Wookiee seems to be kind of chubby and to have a fat ass. That's it. That's the first 2 episodes of this dogshit show. It's below average fan fiction with stilted dialogue, inert suspense, a terrible script, and a prevailing feeling of boredom. This show is one big Force choke.